Welcome to BST, to our first episode for 2025. And we've got here with us Andre Whittaker, CEO, Wellington Rugby League. And also before there was BloodSweat&TalanoaPodcast, there was Mana Talanoa. So we're Talanoaing with the original Talanoa. So welcome, Andre. Kia orana.
Hey, kia orana, talofa lava to you both here. Look, thanks for giving me this opportunity, being first cab off the rank and seeing what you guys have been doing with keen interest and loving the Talanoa theme and getting out there and speaking to our people. So, look, really pleased to be able to have this Talanoa with you. Yeah, fantastic.
Great, Andre. We had to do 20 odd episodes to get ready to get you on. So we're finally there. Hey, look, one of the things we were talking off air is you've got a big meeting tomorrow with Anuka Brown. Now, for those who don't know, tell us who Anuka Brown is.
Yeah, well, Anuka Brown, she's a lady, black American lady, played professional basketball back in the 80s, was an executive member in the NBA with the Knicks, played for the USA, and has been a prominent mover of rights for Black, Indigenous, people of colour, and working heavily in that scene. And I met her through working at UNICEF, which is the role that I had before coming here. And really fortunate that she's out here on holiday. And we figured about catching up for a coffee. But I thought with her really fascinating background in sport, professional sport, and then sort of being able to bring a global view and have that discussion with some of the team tomorrow and a couple of the coaches. And we're looking forward and really privileged that she's coming out to see us and looking forward to that discussion because she's from New York, big-time professional sports person, but come from pretty similar backgrounds as our people in terms of neighbourhoods where sport is a way that you can progress, you can get a scholarship and change your whole life. And so we'll have some discussions about that tomorrow because there's some similar some synergies around that with what happens here with rugby league in our community.
And look, I took some from her background too, some similar things in terms of Pacific communities too, because parents were very big, and particularly her father, in terms of education. And she's turned out to be talented in sport, but also has a family full of academics in terms of that dedication and sort of family commitment to learning.
No, exactly. And one of the pathways to that education for her was through sport, getting a scholarship. And I remember her telling me the story of people in the neighborhood where, maybe didn't quite get the opportunity that she did to be good at sport, get an education, and life took a totally different pathway for them to where she is. So she's really talking about championing the power of a sport, not in just playing in the physical well-being stuff that we know, but all the other things that can happen. So be a really fascinating conversation with her, and also her career background, as an executive in the NBA, working for IBM, business marketing, and then her current role with a philanthropy organization called Tides, which are doing some really good grassroots stuff in the US. And one of the things I like about what's happening at Tides that Anuka's talked to me about is around funding models and around accountability. So often here, and we're forever filling out application forms for funding, and at the end there's an audit, which is an sort of ticking boxes. But the way that they do it at Tides is about assessing long-term partnerships and seeing what are the impacts, and not necessarily about going, well, this is an auditing process, show us the receipts. Of course they want accountability and make sure the money's spent, but their first priority is around what's the impact, and that impact often isn't in a 12-month time frame. It can be 5 years, a decade, and as we know, some of the stuff we're doing is generational. So I'm interested in that corridor tomorrow as well.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I love the fact that Tides sort of looks around social justice and providing sort of tools around that fiscal sponsorship, but then also looking at sort of that promoting equity within communities. And if you look at games like rugby league and that in our country, you can see where sort of the strength of that game has been built off communities that have sort of been at that end around disparity and equity as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we do rely on funding. Our game at Wellington Rugby League, I had a meeting last night with the club chairs, and obviously we talk about finances and funding and that sort of thing. And I said, look, The only difference between what I'm doing is that I got more zeros on the end of my bills compared to you. So, there's it is a role that's community grassroots based, and we rely on community funding. And there's got to be a better model for that in New Zealand, because not only for sport, but also the good and all the uplifting of our community through being connected to sport.
Yeah, and definitely in areas like volunteerism as well. If you put a dollar factor on hours and sort of investment of people in the volunteerism space, and particularly that is rugby league here in New Zealand, you can definitely put a real dollar figure on those contributions, even though they don't come in that form.
No, exactly right. And then if you look at the impact of or outcomes from those people that are volunteering, how much are they helping the country around? Well, if we don't have that, what are the negative impacts of youth with a lot of time on their hands and maybe not a lot of options and where they turn to? So I think there needs to be a lot more analysis and looking at that, and not necessarily about what are your numbers, when are you going to get this done within the next 12 months and quarter. They've got to have a long-term view on it, and easier said than done, but I think those conversations need to take place, and us having the right people in those places like Sport New Zealand and those philanthropy foundations that kind of know our story. One of the things I think we find challenging is having those platforms to tell our story, and it's also part of our nature to be sort of humble about it as well. But those are all the challenges I see as well.
Yeah, and look, all three of us are here have benefited from our participation in sport and that as well. But I've also, as I've sort of got a little older and grayer, sort of also seen that value around it, sort of building social cohesion as well, in our communities.
Exactly, and from a a well-being point of view, cohesion and connection. As we move away from the sport, as you mentioned, you're getting a few more grey hairs. Mine's all gone, but we need that connection through sport and through not only our peers, but sort of that generational impact and being able to work with younger people that are coming through and give them the benefit of our knowledge, but also we learn a lot from them as well. So and so how do you put a value on that with the volunteers? That's keeping that cohesion in the community and in a space that's moving forward. Agree.
Cool. So look, interesting that one, as chief executive of sort of Wellington Rugby League, you've sort of run the full sort of length from end to end in terms of playing, coaching, administration, and now into this sort of key leadership role. Sort of what's been that arc for you? One, you come from a legacy family in terms of from a legacy club with Randwick. So just what's been your sort of your journey, and also those observations over best part of a few decades now in terms of the evolution of football here in Wellington and New Zealand.
It's frightening for me to sit here and say that I can look back at 5 decades of being in the game, and while there was a period where I was not physically doing anything, I was connected to the game. I was seeing what was going on, and then find myself where I am now. Some of the things that are the same are the community impact, being connected. I know in my early days in Randwick, being of Cook Island descent, if you wanted to find Cook Island people, they'd be at the Randwick Club. If you wanted to find Tokelau people, you go to Corriedale or St. George, and the Samoan community were at Eastern Suburbs. So there's that way where there's that thing in sports clubs where people gather, and particularly people with ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and that's happening right across the board, and still does. Some of the things that are changing quite drastically are the amount of time that people have. We mentioned volunteering earlier. There's less time for people to do that because life's 24/7 these days. I think back in my day, people worked overtime on Saturday morning, and at midday they knocked off and everyone went to the football field. And then, that's where you were going to see the family, the cousins, and etc. And all that whanaungatanga and wrap around was happening. We don't see that so much now because less people are involved in the game. They're more and I'd have to say more bigger opportunities. So some of the cohesion, sort of suffers from that as well. But certainly,
Sorry, bro, to cut you off, bro. Chen comes from a small family. I come from a bigger. He's got quite a few brothers. I know you just didn't give us your background, your siblings. Like John, I only knew John, yourself. Did you have any other siblings up? I just thought I'll put that on.
Good kōrero talk, because that was all about the club. If you walked into the Randwick club rooms, you'd look on one wall and there's my brother Charlie, there's my brother Austin, there's my brother Willie, brother John, my sister Shirley, and is on the committee. Her husband was one of the coaches, and there's nephews and nieces all around. And funnily enough, my sister Margaret, who's a little bit older than me, she married a Premier player from Petone, so she'd be over at the Petone club, Mick Rawati, and he was also a Premier player and part of that 82 championship winning side. But so that's our family, and we've always been involved with Randwick. Well, when I say always, my brothers initially their first club was Corridale. They played at Corridale, and then we lived in Nainai, so they also played for the Nainai club, and then it was through that Cook Island connection that we went to Randwick, that the family ended up at Randwick, because that was where the Rasmussens were, and the Munros and those kind of families, the Wainas family, even the Matapuku family who ended up with the Vikings. They were all at Randwick, and those were where the Cook Island people hung out, and the Pupuke family. That's what took us to Randwick. Yeah.
And look, you were there during one of the more sort of storied sort of periods of the club and of success. What was that sort of like, and particularly sort of young in your sort of Premier career?
Yeah, it was a fantastic and fabulous. Even now, I feel my chest rise up, a couple of inches, thinking of the pride that we got from being part of that team, or that era. Really, it wasn't just the team; it was an era through the 80s that I was involved with, and we won 3 grand finals in a row, but and we were played in about 6 or 7, and I was lucky to be part of those. But it actually started before then. It went back to players that went before us in the 60s and 70s who also won 3 grand finals in a row. And one of the things I see is we can't overlook who's gone before us and the legacy they leave, because they don't just leave photos on the wall. They leave behaviors. They leave a standard of operating. They leave expectation, and that gets passed through, and it maintains. And for a club like Randwick, and there are others that have done that, we must acknowledge the legacy that's come behind us, because they set standards, they set behaviors, and they set expectations. And when you arrive at their club, you're in no doubt about what's expected. And thankfully, it was good things. So, I managed to be part of that and played with some wonderful players. You're saying, Shane, how, being young, most of the players in that Premier side, we were under 23 years of age, and playing through grand finals, there brings a certain vibrance to the team when you've got young and players that are experienced by the time they're 23, of winning grand finals, and and they're in the wheel turns and keeps the legacy going.
Yeah. And look, then you had sort of more success at Wainui Yamada as well. What were the sort of common ingredients that made those two clubs very successful during their periods?
Yeah, look, at Wainui, I went over there in 1988, and we played in the 2nd division, and there was myself, and my brother-in-law, Ken Laban, was there, and put a call out to me about, hey, look at what's going on. I just bought a house in Wainui, so it was a natural thing to just had our first child and making it easy by training up the road. But some of the common things were structure and high expectation around quality, and so that certainly was at Randwick. Wainui had a lot of energy and enthusiasm. Needed someone, and let's be honest, Ken went there and brought the structure, brought the discipline, and that's necessary. You need structure, you need discipline. You know what your start point is, you know what you fall back to, and you know how wide you go. Otherwise, for lack of calling it another way, you're playing a big game of touch football at the beach, and and that can look flash, and you can win games like that if you're Canberra or the Broncos. But you look at the Melbourne Storms, you look at the Penriths, and you see the structure, you see them building momentum, and you know what's coming, and you can't stop it. Is another thing. So certainly structure to training, structure to how you're playing the game, and high levels of discipline around training, fitness, and commitment to the team.
Yeah. And look, what did you see as opportunities in terms of the stint at Porirua in the early 90s?
Look, I always saw, firstly, a lot of learnings from my time at Randwick and Wainui, and I was getting towards the end of my playing days, and always thought and always knew, like, there's just so much talent in Porirua. You guys were part of that, and along with Ken and a few others, saw the opportunity. They're like, how do we pass that knowledge on? How do we foster that in a community where we're going into to not only bring good standards of rugby league, but a whole lot of community engagement as well. And that was the opportunity going, wow, look at the athletes that are out here. Imagine if they were showing structured play around dominating the ruck, quick play the balls, ball security, and being patient. Imagine if that came into their game, what it would look like. And so those were the opportunities. And then also making the game stronger in Wellington as we got more outside of the Hutt Valley sort of domination of the game. And then we started to see that.
Yeah. Now you join an illustrious list of players, coaches who have won Wellington championships, one as a player and then gone on to win it as a coach. That year, in terms of Marist, what sort of stood out for you? And when I'm thinking from just what you've said, I could potentially see a lot of structure in that 1995 Marist team. I could see a lot of that building pressure in that as well. What sort of were some of the things that you took in terms of your coaching eye into working with a team?
Yeah, it was those things about structure, a common language. These are getting down to quite technicalities of the game, but just trying to remember the sort of a thing we used to say is winning time and possession, winning the physical, and winning the field positioning. And if you're kind of going, okay, so those are the things that we need to dominate in. And then you can't compartmentalize it down into the things that you do to make that possible. You stay tight around the ruck. You play physical. You intimidate the other players, not through dirty play, but they know when you're running at them, you're going to be running hard and far out. You're going to be a handful to tackle. So that is a wearing down effect, and that's winning the physical. And you, as much as you can, you're winning the possession. So you've got the ball for the full set of six. Going through technical stuff, you're kicking it downfield, and then you're trapping them down there, and you're putting them under pressure. Then you get field positioning, and then really you can start opening up. But you've got to start transitioning towards that and being patient all the way through. And we were lucky that we could do that with the players at Marist. And as it was, a lot of those Marist boys were young fellas like yourself that we engaged with back at Porirua. You're only 17, 18, 19 years old, and here we were turning up with the structure. And probably for the first couple of years, it was, didn't quite sink in. But I feel very lucky that by the time I got there, guys like Tino Brown, Henry Loapo, Mana Wharaimo, Kahu Ropata, Andrew Fioe, our friend Paloni Mada,
Palani.
Ray Liotta, all those things, Watson Peter, all those things were on the back of their hand. And I just needed to remind them of staying on track with that, because as quickly as you do that, you can go away from it as well. So therein comes the discipline and patience about sticking to the game plan. And it was wonderful to do. It wasn't as easy as cool, I've got some good players now, and we just got to turn up the training and win on the day. We actually lost our first few games up, and we were struggling. We were sort of in that, if we don't win the next couple of games, we're in a lot not making the top four playoffs. But we managed to get things back on track, and that really was by sticking to the plan.
Andre was Tommy Malu. Was he full of ears? Did he listen?
Actually, Tommy was there, mate. And, he's such a talented player, as we know. He was a junior Kiwi. Made North Island Kiwi representative residential teams. He's a talent. But a lot of the game plan that we had relied around doing fundamentals really well, which he could do. But he could also play basketball with it. I remember one of the trainings, and it was just simple catch and pass 2-on-3s, and he was throwing it around his back and over the top. I'm going to go, mate, you do one more of those passes, you'll be talking to the reserve grade coach. I want fundamentals demonstrated to the team. And also, as a top player, he understood that and got on with it. But, and on the field, once he did those things, then he just, he was like a centre playing in the front row, being able to play ball. So, but Tommy was I was lucky. Geez, I had some good players. So, yeah.
Yeah, and look, one of the things that you highlight too is that a season is a season. It's about 20 weeks, and it's a progression of playing right at the right time. And I think, how you talk about sort of, the start that you just had that year. I think by the end, you continued the process. You kept trying to refine it, and by the end of the season, that's where you started to see the payoff. And particularly in those playoffs, I felt it was an extended playoffs. If I recall that year, there was something like a top 8.
Yep.
And my sort of recollection was that there was a big wide gap between Marist as the eventual sort of winners of the premiership and the rest of the clubs, just because it was a bit of attrition, but then also just the game had been refined where you guys were playing right at the right end of the season.
No, exactly right. And it's bringing up sort of one-liners that would come along, and what we were trying to do at the start of the season was exactly the same at the end, and there was no box of magic tricks that suddenly in the top 4 playoffs we're going to go, okay, now we're going to unleash this. And really, if you haven't unleashed it in about game 9, game 8, you haven't got time to sort of refine it and get it. So you needed to be on track from say if you're playing say 16 games at about game 9, you need to be doing what you're doing there close to grand final time, because you're just refining it and doing it faster and better. You're not looking for triple back double passes that suddenly you're going to pull out in the final. You're refining those things towards the end, and of course you've got to start with faith in the game plan and what you're doing is the right thing. And I always believe that and never wavered from it. And at that time it actually did. I won't mention did cost people's positions who couldn't get that, and you needed, for the sake of the team, to say, well, we need to make some changes here, and if anything, if there were changes, it was around personnel who could deliver the game, rather than coming up with another magic game plan, because I believed it would work, and it did.
Yeah. So, and I think it was groundbreaking, because in New Zealand at that time, I don't think any other club had sort of, like with Wainuiomata in that late 1980s, had sort of built that structure in, and then it sort of started to tell in terms of the quality of football. But then other teams, it started to be a bit of a gap between what Wainui was incorporating and taking control of games, and other clubs were struggling because they were still sort of 2 to the open, 1 to the blind.
Yeah. We used to call that bob that the other teams would do, blind, open, blind, and while everyone else is playing bob, we were just playing yardage sets and playing it simple. And probably the thing too, it looks simple and people go, well, we can beat this, but there was a lot more to the eye than what, as you know, it's about winning the physicality, and that's around your own personal courage for a start to do that, because you're putting yourself on the line. There wouldn't have been a person that I played with in Wainui or at Marist who wouldn't have the courage to put their body on the line, because that was if you couldn't do that, then you weren't on the team. So that was the first thing. And then it was about subtleties. How do you go to the line? How do you get up off the ground? How do you keep it tight? So groundbreaking, those things. And I think also in terms of Wainui earlier on, gosh, who would have ever thought that a club team from Wainuiomata would have the guts to challenge Manly at Fraser Park? That's we're seeing NRL players all the time coming down here now. But back then,
Yeah.
local team of Wainui fellas, a few from outside of Wainui, playing Matthew Ridge, Ian Roberts, Kevin Edel, Tony Edel,
Yeah.
you name it, Martin Bella, those sort of players, Cliff Lyons, Jeff Tuvey. Those were the guys they brought over. They didn't bring their C team to play us, and you don't kind of think about that at the time. You're a player that's in the ring and it's all happening, and then you sort of look back now and go, wow, that was something special, and we've got to acknowledge that the people that are around doing that, Kara Puketapu, Ken Laban, of course, and the support people that they had around them, Star Olsen. You needed that support. It's more than the coach leading. It's that whole whānau approach as well.
Yeah. Now, Andre, I know you played in a number of sort of national club competitions, and they used to be sort of at the back end of the season after all the grand finals. Keen in terms of just because you're at the sort of the tail end as that national club competition came in. Well, what's your thoughts in terms of, is there going to be an opportunity to do that again? Because one, it did sort of offer an opportunity to lift the standard of football across the country as a whole. And is the conditions or the environment conducive to there ever being sort of a national club competition again in New Zealand?
Yeah. Look, firstly, that national club competition in the context of when it happened basically 30 years ago, and then continuing on for a decade or so after that, you had all the good players in New Zealand taking part of it and on show. So I think the difference now is the talent's leaving earlier, and you maybe haven't quite got the, as I was saying earlier, the guys that were in the Randwick Premiers were between the ages of 19 and 23, young men, apart from my brother sort of thing. And so good young talent isn't sticking around, having an impact on that sort of vibrance of the game. So you may maybe not see the same quality, but the game definitely needs, for the men's game, something of that nature, a national club televised game competition. And probably the magic of it is it's kind of linked to the community, and you've got players that are running out there and people watching the game, personally know them. That's part of the vibe as well. Are the conditions right for it? I think it's time to try it. I definitely as I was saying, younger, talented players are leaving the country earlier. So what we have here isn't quite at the same level, but we do need something that's going to help lift it and bring it up. It has been, I've been lucky enough to sit on some NZRL planning meetings, and that has been mooted. It has been brought up. There's a fair bit of work to pull it together, and one of the big things around it is having enough money to do it, to fly the teams around to play each other every weekend, accommodation, outfit, getting the sponsorship to do that sort of thing, and financial support is probably a big thing too. That's going to be one of the challenges also.
Yeah. No, don't it. So look, I know there's some stuff I'm keen in terms of talking about sort of some of your professional experience away from the game, but just keen because we're talking still in rugby league, just that arc that brought you to the chief executive role. Yeah,
look, I although having that big background in the game, I did enjoy taking the break. Went and did Wakarama, did a whole bunch of other things, and what brought me back into the game was it was my old club Randwick, and opportunity come up to go along to a committee meeting, and I wasn't, they said, "Oh, come along, just put your 2 cents in worth." And next thing I turned around, they elected me chair, and
as you do.
I looked around, far out, and I was thrilled to do that, because I was like, look, the time was right in my life to start doing that thing. But I didn't understand the challenge that was there once I was in the seat, in terms of where the game was at, the numbers that were in the game, the competing commitments that people had around being able to make themselves available and be consistent in the game. That was a massive eye-opener to me, coming from the things that we've just talked about and that I'd experienced in the game. So being involved at that level, at club chair, going to club chair meetings, in an unusual, weird way, suddenly I found myself running the chairs meetings while I was there, and or so running in terms of trying to give that structure and discipline to it, and going, gosh, we're how do we take this forward? What sort of things do we need to have at these meetings? And I could see that the clubs and the communities were responsive, like a good league team is, to structure, to understanding what the plan is, and then the opportunity for the role came up, and I thought, well, now's the time for me to do this at the stage in my life of had my day in the sun as much as that was playing and coaching, and how can I give back, and geez, they're going to pay me for it as well. So
Hey, Andre,
it helps.
Just on behalf of us, BST, as brothers, we want to congratulate you being the first Pacific Island CEO of Wellington Rugby League. So, mate, big ups, bro. When I seen that,
look,
2021.
That's part of it too. Part of my motivation was around the background that I've had in Pacific communities and rugby league in Wellington. Actually, we looked at some stats, and it's the Pacific stats is around 40%. Māori stats are around 50%, and then other. So the Pacific stat is growing, and so there was I felt an obligation to want to try and do my bit for the Pacific community there through rugby league. So so happy to have, by coincidence, be the first Pacifica person there. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of structure that can benefit the Pacific game in terms of governance and management as well.
Yeah,
but, that's the arc from coming back in as a chair and then taking up the role and going, what the hell have I got myself into here? And this is year 5 in the role, and and it's the off season, pre-season, and we're as busy as we were in the on season, and had some really exciting conversations around potential new partnerships, new opportunities and formats for the game. So that arc's brought me in this seat where I've it's funny, I'd look at the equivalent, whoever it was back in my day when I was playing, and never paid any mind to them. All as a player, I was going, where's the field, where's the ref, where's the changing room, and now seeing everything that it takes to bring all that together, to make sure you got the fields, make sure you got the officials, make sure you got the facilities, and then those are some key learnings for me as well. But I'd like to think that some of my sort of career pathways sort of help me make some decisions and thinking around what we're doing as well.
And look, you've got a great little team around you in terms of the Wellington Rugby League and the operational side. And again, I think that's part and due, one, the leadership, but also providing that structure in terms of bringing people's talent out to be able to sort of contribute. One area I'm interested just on your thoughts, and particularly over your tenure, has been the growth of the women's game. And just your observations in terms of what you've seen, I think, right across the game, from sort of top level representative, but also in terms of the professional, but also in terms of domestically, we've seen a real growth in the game in terms of women participation. Just what's been the ingredient, and also what's your sort of your observations around what's made it start have sort of that great growth period?
Yeah, I think, first of all, outside of rugby league and across sports and other sectors, women are finding their feet in more ways than one in terms of equity and equality and community and job roles. And now we're seeing it in sport. And there's a huge appetite to support it. There's a passion for people to support women's sport, and not only just the playing of the sport, but all those things that are about equity, opportunity, and equality. We're seeing that outside of the game and other areas, and that's just transferring into sport. And there's a real excitement around the women's game. And I think some of the drivers around that is they don't have the background or time in the game that we have. Although I would say that just to point out, women's games were being played in Wellington in the 70s, nowhere near like it is now, probably just for a short round or two, and then it went off in maybe 3 or 4 years. Nothing like the consistency that we're seeing now. Yeah. And the women have a hunger to learn the game and pick up the new skills and listen and learn, how do we play this game better? And consequently, it's exciting to watch them play because they play footy. They get on with the game. One of the things I noticed, the men's game compared to the women's, is they don't back chat the ref. So there's no slagging and slinging at the ref. So the ref can just get on with the game. If a cheap shot does happen, and very rarely does it, they don't fire up and get into this payback mode. It's almost like, hey, sister, hey, yeah, sorry. And so what that means is we see football. And that's what we come to watch. And sure, we need the physicality when they're dominating the ruck and playing hard, and we're seeing that. So that's some of the excitement of the game. It does take a bit of work to get there. We've been lucky to have one of the things we were mindful of was ensuring that we appointed a woman to coach women. And we were very lucky that we had the timing right with that, with someone like Ake Pereira being able to step into the Orcas and just an absolute role model for women in the game. And, you know, if what's the saying? If I can see it, then I can be it. So they're seeing woman leadership. Ake Anatuia, you know, Brenda Collins, Marianne Collins, a range of other ladies, Ada Rongatawa in our game. We could go on, Ala Winitana. We're starting to see women lead in the game. And so that brings excitement and has a multiplying effect, is what I'm seeing. In terms of getting the game to where we are, that was hard work. When I came along, we wanted to try get the women's game back on board. We started off with a nines concept on the very first launch of the. So we played 9-a-side games, but like for 15-minute halves, and that was, you know, on the first game we had first round we had 6 teams. 2 teams defaulted the night before, and about 20 minutes before kickoff, I received a text from one of the coaches saying, "Sorry, bro, we're not going to make it today." And I was like, "Shoot, how are we going to do this?" But you know, and I think therein was another thing with the woman. They went with the flow and stuck with it. And we said, "Hey, look, come back next week. We're going to do it again." And to the stage now where we've got the women's team led by Ake playing in the first division, national first division, beat Auckland, beat Canterbury, beat Waikato. So those are big ups to happen in a very short time. And I can only just see that growing more.
Yeah, look, I know of the women's teams initially in the 1990s in terms of the competition that sort of reignited there, because I know there's been previous women's teams, and it's been great to see sort of that next couple of generations of players come through. And then I think and Andre, I think this is credit to yourself in terms of the leadership and vision at Wellington Rugby League of the board and of the exec, is in terms of the appointment of Ake Pereira in the Wellington women's coach role, because I think that has been sort of covering all those bases really sort of strengthens the game. And I think why I asked you about it is because I've seen sort of the sort of real progress made in the women's game in Wellington over the last, over your tenure as well.
Yeah, look, and before I miss out, no, look, there's actually at least 8 young Kōtiro young ladies that have come through the 16s and 17s, and they're playing in that next level NRL competition. You know, they're on show there. You know, the likes of Hanua Rimoni, you know, Billy Va'a. You know, there's 8 of them, and they've come through their clubs. They've come through playing for the Orcas. That's part of the pathway. It isn't the only thing. I know a key part for all of those young ladies has been what's happened for them in Pacifica iwi tournaments, what's happening for them in school. And also, you know, so they're playing rugby as well. So this is the other changing dynamic. There's a lot of influences that are along the pathway for young people. And in this case, this fine young group of young ladies who are now getting their opportunities. Wellington Orcas, they're part of it. That gives them a chance to be seen at national tournament, get picked into an NZRL team, and all the learnings and the profile that gives them helps boost all the other stuff that's going on. So there's a whole sort of ecosystem that's connected to make that happen. which maybe wasn't the case previously. Yeah.
I know it's also brought sort of people like Ken back in terms of his involvement through the women's game and coaching some of these young players who are heading off to Australia sort of for opportunities in the wider part of the game.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's been great to see that come back from Ken back into the game. And not only is the influence on those individual players and the teams, but also for the coaches and the managers and trainers who are learning a lot around, if we just use that reference point, there was the Wainui team in 1989 or 90 or whatever it was that played Manly. There was a certain thing about what they were doing. That was a long time ago, but we're talking about commitment, discipline, quality and excellence. That group of people are getting that right now. Some things in the game are different, a lot different. 10 meters, interchange, bench, those sort of things. Yep, they make the game operate a little bit differently, but it's those sort of other ingredients that are sort of more about your own personal attributes and role modeling that you see that help bring the technical things that make you win the game together. You've got to have that. So yeah, wonderful big ups to Papa Ken doing that for the team. I noticed, if you've seen those young girls play and I almost feel like that's the wrong thing to call them, I've seen them cut the ball up better than some of the premier men's players. And that's, sorry, I don't mean that in but their body position, they know where they're running to, they know what spot they're hitting, and they know that their role is to quickly make yards in a physical, confrontational way and to get up and play the ball quickly. And sort of get, they understand those roles very clearly. And you can see it by the way their body language and the way that they and there again, there's that word, the structure is there. They know where they're going. They're not trying to figure out, what's happening, where do I, they're going to their spots and they know what's going to happen next. And all of those things help breed success in the game. Yeah.
Now, look, we're heading into the 2025 season. Sort of where's Wellington Rugby League position and what are some of the big things coming up?
Yeah, look, we're launching our first round of games in the senior men's on the 5th of April. I'll wind back quickly. Actually, this weekend, we've got our youth 9s for the boys, 14s, 16s and 18s up at Purua Park, number 3 and 4, starting at 9 o'clock. Big opportunity there. And then next week is the girls. From there, players will be picked for the Orcas team that will go to the national tournament. But also we've created an Orcas pod for under 14s players. Don't want to use the academy, but it's about having a wrap around a group of under 14s boys and girls players. So that's starting, and then moving into the senior comp, 5th of April, opening round at Ngāti Toa Domain, and all teams there in the Premier 1 division, and then playing through to grand finals in the first week of August. The Prem 2 and the women's competition start 2 weeks after the men's Premier 1 round. So that's really exciting. Nice kind of tight competition. We're still getting the registrations for the women's team, but I figure we're going to have at least 6 teams, and just having 6, that'll be strong. Potentially 7 with our men's grade. A little bit of movement in some teams. Not quite going to be ready for Premier 1s this season. So one of the things, and I'm open to talking about it because it's all public knowledge as of the chairs meeting 2 nights ago, is that the Victoria Hunters will play in the Premier 2 division. They won't field a Premier 1 team. So that's a little bit of a juggle on the draw that we anticipated, but good for the Hunters to do that, who've been really struggling in the last 4 years, maybe 5, and to go back and regroup. If they look at the example of a club like Petone, who did that for a couple of years and now back in Prem 1, and so that's a smart thing for them to do. So that's happened. The Trentham Titans, who have been playing in the Prem 2 division, will come up and play in Premier 1. So we'll see some new teams up there. Petone coming back into the Division 1. and I expect a really strong, tough competition. It's been great to see on Facebook anyway. Teams are out there, been doing the pre-season training November, December, and and the clubs like Wainui go into it as favourites. See if they can win it 3 years in a row and be one of those hat trick premier clubs, which they're more than capable of doing. So, looking forward to a big season.
No, it's looking good. So that's really taking off. Now, look, one of the other things that you're more than just one trick and pony, and that you did outside of rugby league, did a couple of other roles, and I'm particularly interested in the role you did with UNICEF. And how did you sort of fall into that particular role, and what were some of the experiences? Yeah. One, my interest in terms of my background with the Red Cross and humanitarian sector, and also I know the wonderful work that UNICEF does sort of across the world. So keen to have you just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. You use the right words there, fall into. In a previous career working for an ITO, worked for and sales management for various companies, and a role came up at UNICEF, and it was about managing a relationship between UNICEF and New Zealand Rugby and the All Blacks. And to be honest, I had no idea what UNICEF did. I had to Google them and go, are they a computer company? And then saw their kaupapa, and they're global. They're in 160 countries around the world. Whoa. And they utilize sport as a vehicle for change, and that really resonated with me. The first thing was, wow, that would be cool, working with New Zealand Rugby and the All Blacks. But then I realized the bigger scope of UNICEF and its humanitarian work around the world, which is responding to disaster, being there when there's famine, when there's conflict, and being able to look after kids, basically. And one of the things that they bring in those environments that does that is sport, and they champion sport as a way to engage the kids while all this chaos is going on around them. Some of the normality is kept through engaging them through sport. Education happens. Things like medical checks, and so that all happens through sports programs. New Zealand Rugby and the All Blacks were ambassadors for UNICEF, and the role involved when the All Blacks were traveling and doing their tours around the world is organising engagements for them with local communities, and I was lucky to do some of that, and I met some fascinating people, and one of the most really interesting things that I got to do there was be along Sonny Bill Williams in the Middle East, and we went to Lebanon, and we were right on the Syrian border visiting one of the refugee camps, and basically to draw a profile around the work that UNICEF's doing. Sonny Bill, obviously a big superstar, and bringing eyes on the work that UNICEF is doing, and in addition to that, Sonny himself being a Muslim, and that being a Muslim area resonated with him. And one thing I found about Sonny too is he's like all of us footballers around the world. He's another Fob Islander Māori boy from the suburbs who's playing footy and did really well. And he had that, but obviously he's got a lot more going on around that. So that was fascinating. And the other person I'll mention is Jonah Lomu was an ambassador for UNICEF, and one of my roles was to and somehow the relationship had waned, and I came on board, and they said, hey, look, get in touch with Jonah and let's get a program going back in with him. And I was really fortunate to be able to meet Jonah. And same thing, he's got this big, literally, as you know, he was a big I won't say imposing, but he's larger than life. But when we sit down and talk to him, it's like me talking with the bros talking about footy. He just happens to be a superstar, and but there was that common cordial with Sonny, with Jonah around footy. And interesting talking to Jonah, and when I just said, "Oh well, bro, I'm a leaguey," and he goes, "Yeah, that was my first game too, bro, until I got playing this." But oh well, And it's funny, we had a really interesting conversation around that and his time, playing down in South Auckland and then going to Counties Manukau. And the same with Sonny, same. He said if it wasn't for league, he'd have been, he was helping his dad, contracting, doing painting and whatever they could really. And, through sport, the world's changed for them. And so UNICEF brought me close to that. But it also showed me beyond sport, other things around people's rights and, the United Nations and the rights of children, the rights of Indigenous people, the rights of wahine. And I find, I guess, if there's another side to sports like rugby and rugby league, obviously male sports, and we can have our blind spots around our domination of those worlds, and in some ways dismiss and be part of the problem around equality and equity for women. Yeah. And so part of what's happening now of our women's game is helping to address that. And a lot of that isn't intentional. That's just the world that surrounds men's professional sport. It's what we see on TV. We're seeing it change a lot. And, that side of another aspect of life, I guess, really came home strong to me working for UNICEF around broader rights, equality and equity for people as well. And, looking forward to that kōrero with Anuka Brown at our office tomorrow.
Yeah. Look, what was the experience of the camps? Because you see a lot of children, and children are children, and there's an element of resilience. But, you're talking about people that are experiencing, quite a bit of hardship, quite a bit of displacement, disorientation. Just what was some of the impressions you took from sort of the refugee camps in Lebanon and on the border?
Yeah, look, obviously, you got kids sleeping in tents with their families, and sometimes kids being kids, that's what life is around them. They accept what's there. But I guess from a medical point of view, all the trauma that's going on there, as much as we're trying to protect the kids, give them some sport, they can't help but that impacting on growth of their brains, growth of their bodies, through lack of nutrition. So there's huge impacts around lack of good nutrition. There's huge trauma around the chaos and the violence that's going on, and there's huge trauma around basic living conditions and not having education and not learning. So UNICEF, like many other NGOs, work in that space. Kids are kids, though. One of the really fascinating experiences when I was there with Sonny, and they were filming Sonny doing stuff, and he was getting interviewed, and there were a bunch of kids running around in the background, and they kept walking in front of the camera, and the directors were saying to me, "Oh, look, can you keep those kids away? We have to cut and do this all over again." So there was a soccer ball, and I picked it up and kicked it, and they chased it, and they brought it, like a dog. So that's a wrong analogy. When you throw a ball and a puppy runs, and they kept coming back with it. So I thought I'd better go over there, and I was kicking the ball with them. And these were kids that were standing in the clothes that they'd probably been wearing for days in a row. Their faces were filthy from just because the filth is around them. They're a little bit jaundiced. They haven't had good nutrition, but they're doing okay. But being able to play, and I saw my own kids there. Like, they kicked me the ball, I kick it back to them, and it was like, "Yay, Dad, do it again, Dad." That's what came to me. So kids are kids around the world, and a simple thing like play, which we can take for granted and have so many expensive nonsense devices that people are playing on. Here was this ball that was providing so much engagement, joy, that just it was a moment for me that said how much our kids are the same around the world, but also thinking about what it's like back home. But that's not to say, well, okay, so our kids back home, they should be thankful. Yes, they should be. But in communities where there are lack of resources in New Zealand, where they're underserved, a similar kind of trauma is going on, certainly in terms of resources, nutrition they might have access to, or no food. And if there's chaos around the home, that's affecting the kids as well. That's affecting their brain growth. And research has shown that the stunting of the brain through basically violence that might happen in the home, because the kids shut down to it and stop from growing. It's no different from kids that are in Lebanon that are hearing bombs dropping in the background. So, while that's a sort of wide comparison, but that's researched scientific facts around that. So it's made me think about the role that we do around how do we create communities that create mana hauora, so that our kids aren't around chaos and they aren't having that trauma. And that's been some of the career things that I've seen that I think about in the role that I'm doing here. Although you wouldn't think that on Sunday when you see me running around putting the flags out and the rubbish. But look, that experience of seeing the kids and basically their chaos means bombs are being dropped 40 kilometers away from them. A neighborhood here high in deprivation. Well, there aren't bombs, but there's chaos there, and the chaos to the kids is doing the same thing.
Yeah. And look, I think in both instances, a place of safety, and this is where, you talk about the camp and being away from, the front lines. I think in New Zealand, this is where the potential where you have for community things like sport or community hubs that bring communities together to provide that place of safety. So no, Andre, I really appreciate you sharing it. One, because I think sometimes we can sort of sit here in New Zealand and feel we're too far away from things happening, and just knowing that, there are impacts that ripple, and they may not reach us now, but like a wave, it's surely sort of some can reach us in terms of, if things are left sort of unresolved or not dealt with.
Well, and I was lucky in that role, at a conference, I met a media person working for UNICEF who spent a lot of time in the hotspots in Africa, and he was talking about how the young men there are being recruited into the military because there's nothing for them to do. They're bored. And I said, well, similar thing happens back home for us. If we don't have stuff for our young men, they can end up in, recruited into organizations which aren't too dissimilar from being thrown with arms and going to war. So those similar impacts are happening around the world to communities, underserved, ethnic communities. They're not too far away. Some of the outcomes might be drastically different in some ways, but the similarities are there for sure.
No, definitely. So look, mate, as we sort of change gears into our final sort of bit, I was keen in terms of, you're probably one of the fittest men sort of pushing 60 that I know and I've seen. Well, you and George Whātālongo for sure in terms of that. But I was just thinking, post footy, and this has been some of the themes of some of our episodes, is that post footy period is sometimes a period of real vulnerability for our men, but I think this will become something that'll be relevant for women as well, in the longer term as we see more sort of players in that space too. And just sort of what's the secret been to your own sort of approach to sort of that finishing football, and been looking for activities that one would sort of maintain sort of that activity you sort of had in your 20s and 30s.
Yeah. Well, I've been really lucky. And you mentioned George Whātālongo. He was the person that really got me into it. And I took up the sport of waka about 20 years ago. And it's a physical sport. You're paddling, but on the water. And I actually went out after work today with one of the bros. And physically it's taxing on the body, and you're working your core. And also when you do the sport, I'm competitive about it, so I want to do well even at this age. So you keep yourself in good nick so that you can do that, because when you're a long way out to sea on your boat and you run out of physical energy, you still got to get home. So you make sure that you can do that, and you give yourself an exercise program. So I firstly enjoy doing the sport. I've always enjoyed physical activity, and I put it down to something that goes back to that legacy back at the Randwick Club, where it was instilled in everyone to train hard, and I managed to be able to keep doing that. When I stopped football, I did have a period there where I took a break from it. I had 3 kids, busy life, a lot of work, and the weight did fluctuate, but I always came back to being active. And I think it's finding the thing that you enjoy doing. And I know that sounds like, why what's the magic thing? Is it 10 press ups, then 20 burpees, and then eat a scoop of protein? It has been sensible with your food, and it's doing what you enjoy. If it's walking, if it's lifting weights, I know men at my age now, it's important that we keep up our strength. So that kind of resistance training is important.
Yep.
But with Waka, I enjoyed it. It's a similar community rugby league, very Pacifica, very Māori, very kaupapa driven, and there's a lot of the whanaungatanga and connectiveness that's there, and a lot stronger on tikanga, and I guess at a point now where those things are more important to me, and it's helping me exercise, and I also would say don't just rely on the exercise. Go and see the doctor. Go and get your bowel checks, your blood checked, your heart rate, your prostate, just running around and eating good food and fitting a good pair of jeans isn't the only thing. You need to go and see the specialists. You need to go and see the experts who are gonna do that as well. And it does take sometimes in this household, wahine pushing us along to make sure it does happen, because but I think it's that what you enjoy. Yep. The diet is a tough one, because we're brought up in an environment, I think of my home, there's 7 kids plus nieces and nephews. So the table's full of bulky food, rice, pasta, mince, bread, and donuts and those kinds of things, which feed the family and go a long way. And but we need to have an awareness around. I really think a strong awareness around nutrition, about what are the things that you can do that fill that gap in your belly, but isn't gonna have a negative effect as well. So if there's anything I'm advocating as much as exercise now, is eat the right food. And I don't always do it. It's a challenge. I like having a couple of biscuits at night with a cup of tea. I don't eat the whole packet anymore, but good nutrition, and easier said than done. There's a lot that impacts that around cost, availability, lifestyle, household, and that sort of thing. But if we can start getting there again, that structure and discipline around that, that all helps.
Sounds good. And a lot more celery, spinach and carrot sort of smoothies, which I think I saw you post once, and I was thinking, man.
I had a kale muffin this morning.
Kale.
Kale.
No. Look, and those things, and you find out about all the goodness that's in that kind of stuff, like silver beets and broccoli and again, I appreciate not a lot easier said than done, but those are some of the things, and I think when people start thinking about them and then taking the action, and things will happen for them.
Well, look, you're definitely a testament in terms of you're looking great, you're in great shape, and sort of not a day over 30, mate.
I might put the boots back on. So long as they don't pass me the ball and expect me to make tackles, I'll be fine.
I reckon. Well, when you were talking earlier around, all of those things around body position and all that, I sort of think, is that why I've got the onset of arthritis in a couple of my joints now?
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, and we're from the era of the what's wrong with you? Spray some water on it. Keep going, get back out there, and we're a lot more aware of those. But I am still from the school of there's being sore and there's being injured, and again, I remember our old coach, the person that we mentioned before, saying, well, if you're sore, well, we're all sore, but if you're injured, go and see a doctor. You don't sit around there talking to me and everyone go, well, I don't need a doctor. I said, oh, you saw? We'll get back on the field then. So, look, I think that's a point with our game too. It's a physical game. You need to be able to endure pain. We can't. Let's not sugarcoat that. And it's a game of collision, where injuries will happen, and it's not a game for everyone. And we need to make sure that people are in the right condition, being given the right technical advice on how to run, how to tackle, doing the physical stuff to look after themselves. And the game's wonderful. You know, you get through it and you love it. But if you don't accept the reality of it's a contact game and you need to prepare yourself for it, then maybe it's not for you. And I'm happy as the CEO of Wellington Rugby League to say the game isn't for everyone, but it's a wonderful game for people that put the right work in, put the structure and discipline in. There's huge rewards for it. But you know, climbing Mount Everest isn't for everyone as well, you know, but I'm sure there's a lot of rewards in that. Yeah.
I reckon. Well, Andre, look, it's been a real pleasure in terms of sitting down with us, and really, just want to acknowledge the wonderful work you're doing in Wellington Rugby League, and that just a really grateful us guys in terms of sharing a couple of things here tonight, and really generous of your time. So sort of thank you, and really appreciate those words of wisdom that you provided. And always welcome back, and I'm sure at some stage we'll get you back for a little bit more sort of Talanoa, or we can come on Mana Talanoa. We can do either or.
yeah, we could do a joint series. Yeah. No, look, Shane, Taho, look, it's been wonderful being able to talk to you. And you know, it's a shame the Bro Tiate's not here. We would have had a few exchanges about Cook Island Rugby League and the time I copped an elbow from him when he was playing for Petone and the Masters and all that sort of thing. So to the three of you and bringing this to our community and being able to tell our story, you know, it's important, and I've really enjoyed this. Wonderful. Yeah.
Great.
Appreciate it.
So thank you, Andre, and we'll see everyone next time.
Cool. Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dave.